Welcome to the Sweepstakes College Baseball Podcast, where we are now 10 weeks into the college baseball season, where we have put out rankings every single week, as well as our Player of the Week, top plays, and setbacks. And we're going to do the same thing this week, starting with our Player of the Week, and that's going to be highlighted by Christian Moore of Tennessee after an amazing performance against another top 5 or top 10 team in Kentucky, winning this game or the series and just putting up crazy numbers, going 9 for 15, 9 RBIs and 4 home runs, including 3 on Sunday. So really just led the team to a very impressive series win and continuing to prove that they're one of the best teams in the SEC and the nation.
Yeah, this is a guy that's really boosted his draft stock over the course of this year and did it again this week in some tight competition and, really impressive series win for Tennessee. And this guy was a huge reason for that.
Yep, for sure. And next up, we have our play of the week. There is no sound this week, but we'll play it now. All right, so here we had a play by pretty much the entire outfield of Oakland, where left fielder John Lowinger tipped the ball back into play to stop a home run from happening, and then the center fielder Reggie Busey dove and caught the ball to get the out. So really just impressive teamwork. To be there as the center fielder to back up the left fielder there is super impressive, and yeah, just overall could be one of the best plays we see this year. To be able to stop a home run and then also get the out in that fashion is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think I've seen it happen a couple times before where someone reaches over, brings it back, and maybe bobbles it a bit, doesn't catch it cleanly when robbing the home run, but don't think I've ever seen this where it goes to a completely different teammate to finish off the catch. Yeah, great job being there for the backup, for the support, and yeah, awesome play.
Yeah, it's 2 highlights and one, so it's got to be the top play this week. And now going to our patent pending sweep setback of the week, we have the easy choice here in Oregon State. They're pretty much the only top team that really just had a complete blunder this week, going 1-4, losing one of their midweeks, and then getting swept at Cal on the weekend. So overall, just really tough week, and they were in control of the conference, and now that is not the case. So, yeah, this is a year that Oregon State should have just easily been able to win this conference. There isn't really any team in competition for it, but they've definitely let teams be able to creep back into that consideration. And yeah, it's a tough way to really have a weekend go, especially when you have Travis Bazana come back from injury. Seems like your whole team should be back on track, and that just didn't happen.
Yes, team that, like you said, looked like they were in complete control of the Pac-12 and multiple of the games this weekend. It looked like they were in control as well, but they let them slip, let some leads go late, and yeah, props to Cal for winning some tough games and putting together a pretty solid year by Cal standards so far. But yeah, terrible weekend for Oregon State overall. Not the type of weekend you want when you're sitting atop of the Pac-12 standings.
Yeah, for sure. And now we have our series prediction results from the past week. We chose 5 of what we thought would be the best series coming up for the upcoming weekend. All of them happened to be ranked versus ranked this week, so super exciting week for just the talent level at the top, going against what should be super competitive games. And overall, we went 500. I went 4-1. Kevin went 1-4. So we broke even there, but the gap is definitely widening between the difference for both of us. We went 1-1 on the picks we agreed on, and then I swept the sides that yeah, we disagreed on. So definitely a rough one for you, but there were a lot of great games and a lot of close ones that could have gone either way.
Yeah, definitely a tough one to swallow with just how many close games there were. A lot of 2-1 series, not a lot of sweeps, and yeah, just a lot of tight knit games, couple one-run games, and so yeah, tough one, and yeah, we'll have to try and bounce back next week.
Yeah, for sure. We need to keep chipping away to get over at least the cumulative 500 mark. We're almost there. We're like one game back at this point. But yeah, definitely want to just slowly do better. But we have a lot of great series coming up, and we're going to choose one that are hard to decide between the winners for and make it difficult for the overall rankings there. But yeah, now we're gonna get into the rankings, starting with the top four teams, all staying in the same spot, but we'll run through them quickly. With Texas A&M at that number one spot, still went 3-1, winning their midweek, and then going to what was number 17 Alabama and winning that series. They essentially just overpowered Alabama from the get go. Yeah, and they had for the most part an opportunity to win that last game, so almost had the sweep there. Was just unable to turn that thing in, but yeah, overall super impressive, continuing to prove that they're deserving of that number one spot at least right now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt at this point that Arkansas has the best pitching staff in the country, but I think right now Texas A&M is the most well-rounded club. They've just been playing extremely well, and they do look like the number one team in the country at this point. Yeah, super impressive series at Bama, who's knocked off some top teams at home. Just knocked off Arkansas the other week, so not an easy place to play, not an easy team to beat, but Texas A&M continues to roll.
Yeah, and next up, speaking of Arkansas, we have them staying in that number two spot after a 5-1 week, or I guess 4-1. Was it 5-1?
Four
Four
and
and one.
one.
Yeah, 4-1. Texas Tech winning both those games, super close midweek games, and then going to South Carolina was number 24 team in the country and winning that series there. So super impressive. All those games were against teams that could be ranked in the future or are ranked right now. So yeah, should be close games, but maybe a little too close for Arkansas's standard from what we've seen from them. The offense just still isn't fully clicking. The pitching staff can lead them to a lot of wins, but definitely want that offense to turn it up another notch to be able to yeah, keep this thing going.
Yeah, this was actually a pretty solid week. I mean, you see the 4 and 1 and it looks solid, but yeah, like you said, Texas Tech right on the fringe of being ranked, and so tough to play 5 games in a week against very solid competition, but they handled it well, especially going on the road on the weekend after playing 2 games in the midweek. So yeah, overall good week, and definitely would like to see the offense click some more, but they're still getting wins.
Yeah, and speaking of offenses clicking, we have Tennessee now in that number three spot, staying there after going 3-1, winning the midweek, and then going to what was number six Kentucky and winning that series. And they just continue to really impress on the offensive side, especially no matter who they're facing. It just seems like they're gonna put up crazy numbers. And this week it was led by Christian Moore, but a lot of other weeks there are other players chipping in and putting up crazy numbers. So really can just be any number of players on the offensive side that can put up ridiculous stat lines. And yeah, just this week it was one player, and it can be led by a whole slew of others.
Yeah, I think they may have solidified themselves as the best offense in the country at this point. Quite a few future pro players on this team, and they just continue to rake 1 through 9. And yeah, super impressive team. They just continue to mash and look to be at a similar level as to the dominant Tennessee team from 2 years ago.
At number four, we have Clemson after a 3-1 week versus Charlotte midweek, winning that game, and then versus Pitt on the weekend, getting that series win. So kind of what you expect. I mean, went 3-1. Would have been nice to go undefeated there, but yeah, got the job done. It was against kind of lesser competition, especially in conference against maybe one of the worst teams there. So he got the job done, but definitely had the potential to do better there.
Yeah, they're just not looking like they're playing quite at the level they were previously. But you'll take a 3-1 week. It's certainly getting back on the right track to have a winning weekend. But just looks like they're not quite on the level they were. Not sure what's up there exactly, but we'll see if they're able to get clicking again. Hopefully, not a case of a team peaking too early in the season.
Yeah, for sure. And now at 5, we have a little bit of a controversial pick with Kentucky going up one spot, even though they lost their weekend series versus number 3 Tennessee, like we mentioned, but they did win their midweek at Louisville, so pretty impressive midweek there. And then they've shown that they can beat the bad teams and the mediocre teams in the SEC. And this is the first week that they've kind of had a real challenge. Obviously, they've played decent SEC competition so far, but they haven't faced the top teams yet. And this Tennessee match was the first time that happened, and they played relatively well. Sure, it was at home. You'd kind of want them to take that series, but they played well enough, and just with their overall SEC record, they are showing that they can compete with the best now. So that kind of gives them that little bit of validation to move them up a spot, even though they had a losing weekend series.
Yeah, I mean, 1 and 2 weekend, not the best, but like you said, first weekend against one of the top teams in the SEC, and they didn't play fantastic, but got that win on Friday. They were competitive in the other 2 games, and it really just solidified their overall record and SEC record. And they just look like one of the best teams in the country, and they've been incredibly consistent for most of the year. And so we'll see how it rounds out as they continue to play tough teams. But yeah, they've been playing well.
Yep. And now at 6, we have Duke going up 3 spots from last week after a 3-1 week, winning their midweek, and then going to Virginia Tech and winning that series. So overall, good week, going 3-1 against relatively decent competition on the weekend. But there were some really close games Duke has played, it seems like, in a lot of them recently. And they're coming out on the good side right now, but definitely could have gone the other way. But yeah, I mean, this Duke squad has shown that they can win close games and has a good record overall, so definitely deserving to go up at this point.
Yeah, I think the Duke style of winning right now is kind of similar to the way Clemson was a couple weeks ago, where it was a lot of kind of ugly games, but they kind of had that clutch factor and they were reeling out the wins even against tough competition. It kind of seems like the way Duke's been winning recently. Very solid team and one of the top teams in the ACC. Just would like to see a little more oomph, a little more certainty in those wins.
Yeah, definitely want to see this Duke team just turn it up another notch. I mean, it seemed like they had the best bullpen coming into the season. Hasn't panned out the best. They have definitely had their games where the bullpen has collapsed a little bit. But I mean, they still can win the close game. So when it really matters, they turn up. But now at 7, we have East Carolina going up 3 spots as well after a 4-0 week, winning the midweek and then sweeping Wichita State on the weekend. So good week overall against lesser competition. Wichita has proven that they can be a decent team. So maybe they got them on an off week, or East Carolina is just that good, but they've shown that they're probably a little bit a class above the rest of the other mid majors like they do most years. But right now, the top 2 pitchers on East Carolina are really proving themselves to be potential All Americans, and that's something you need for a team to make a deep run in the postseason. And East Carolina is hoping that this year might finally be the year to break the curse.
Yeah, it seems like the last couple weeks, East Carolina was in a stretch of having those 3-1 weeks, not playing great competition. So good to see them get back on the right side of things with the 4-0 week. You kind of expect that with the way East Carolina's played the last couple of years. They've been one of the best mid majors in the country, certainly the most consistent mid major in the country. And yeah, it seems like they're really clicking right now. Like you said, that pitching staff is pretty dominant and not one you want to face in a regional or super regional. So I really like the postseason outlook on this squad.
Yeah, for sure. And now at 8, we have Wake Forest going up 4 spots. Even though it was a 2-2 week, they lost their midweek against UNC Wilmington, which seems like they're a pretty decent squad overall, and then took the weekend series against what was number 7 Florida State. So good week overall, even though they lost the midweek. The most important thing is winning that weekend series, especially when you're in a top conference like the ACC. So Wake Forest continuing to prove that they have gotten hot at the right time. They definitely had their struggles at the beginning of the year, but they're really turning things around in conference. So if they keep going on that path, then they have a chance to really go far in the postseason.
Yeah, rough to drop that midweek, but like you said, UNCW is not a bad team at all. Look like they may be in contention to win their conference, so not a bad squad. But yeah, Wake has been playing well the last couple weeks, looking more like the team we expected them to be coming into the year. They've been handling some tough competition on the weekends, and it'll be exciting to see if they can continue this through the end of the year into the postseason.
Yep, for sure. And now at 9, we have the team that Wake beat, Florida State, after going 1-3 the past week, losing their midweek as well, and then going to Wake Forest and losing that series. So not a terrible week if they did end up going 2-2, but unfortunately, losing that midweek just doesn't look good overall aesthetically. But could have been worse. I think that Florida State being able to compete with Wake Forest this weekend was actually a pretty good sign, considering it seemed like they had two of their starters out. So really could have been worse. But yeah, grabbing one win and being competitive was what you kind of want to see from Florida State if they're dealing with that kind of uncertainty.
Yeah, I actually felt pretty good about Florida State coming out of this weekend. They're one of those teams that didn't face a lot of the tougher teams in the ACC to start out conference play, but now as they're getting into it, they continue to play well. I thought they played well on the road this weekend, even with a couple guys out, like you said. 1-3, not the prettiest record on the week, but I felt pretty good about how they looked on the weekend, and I do like their outlook moving forward still.
Yep. And now at 10, we have another ACC team in Virginia after going 2-2, winning their midweek, but then against Georgia Tech, losing that series at home. So not a great week overall. I think this Virginia team has shown that their offense can compete with anybody, but the pitching staff is a little bit questionable. And considering that they were at home this week, you'd expect them to win that series and probably go 3-1 on the week. Yeah, and just need to kind of prove it against Georgia Tech, a team that's one of the decent teams in the ACC. Could be ranked at some point this season, but got to be able to beat a team at home if you want to be considered the top team, or at least one of them in the ACC.
Yeah, this is a tough one to drop for Virginia. Potentially hurts their chances of a top 8 seed. They certainly can clean that up the rest of the year, but would have been a nice one to continue to stay up in the rankings, move into that top 8. Especially losing to a team like Georgia Tech, who's been pretty inconsistent this whole year. Not a team that you're really fearing, especially at home. So not a great one to drop, especially when your offense is putting up numbers and you're just giving up more runs than you can score.
Yeah, for sure. And now at number 11, we have Oregon State dropping back 6 spots this past week. Just a terrible week overall, going 1-4, going to Nevada and going 1-1 in the midweek, and then at Cal getting swept. Just really brutal week overall. This is kind of their first big mess up. They had a little bit of a hiccup against USC earlier in the year, but definitely going to Cal, you expect, I mean, to at least get one game, if not win the series. I mean, this Oregon State team should be by far the best team in the Pac-12. So you expect them to continue to win series week in, week out. And it seems like they've shown some major flaws on the road this year. So far, they've played 11 games, gone 4-7. So really, not a great look, especially in a pretty down year for the conference.
Yeah, just a major mess of a week for them. Can't really do that, especially against Cal, who's not one of the top teams in the pack this year. They are one of the better teams, but there's just not a whole lot of competition in that conference at the top. Oregon State should be able to handle them, even though it's on the road. And I mean, we touched it on the setback of the week. Just really a disastrous week overall.
Yeah, and now at 12, a team that has similar struggles on the road in Vanderbilt. They're moving up 1 spot from last week after going 3-1, going on the road and winning their midweek game, and then versus Florida, winning that series. So a few weeks ago, this would have seemed like a really good week, going 3-1 and winning the series versus Florida. But after Florida's just awful downfall the past few weeks, it's not an amazing series win. Obviously, it's still good getting the job done at home, but definitely could have looked better a few weeks ago. but I think at this point it clearly shows a gap between the top few teams in the SEC, and then Vanderbilt's just right behind that bunch, and then there are a few other teams right behind Vanderbilt at this time, but Vanderbilt's just right near the top, but definitely not even really close to that level at this point.
Yeah, I would agree that Vandy's just a step down from that top tier in the SEC. Similar to Oregon State, they've struggled on the road this year. I think they've been swept twice now, and so you just can't really have that even on the road. Got to be able to pick up some wins, and this was a solid week, but definitely want to see that consistency carry over week to week.
Yeah, and next up at 13, we have UC Irvine going up one spot as well after a 3-1 week, losing their midweek versus USC, and then sweeping the weekend series versus SDSU. Good weekend overall. I mean, would have liked to see that midweek win. SDSU is not a good team, really, just looking at their record and how they've been playing this year. And they played them really close, UC Irvine, and yeah, SDSU super close series, so good to get the sweep there, but definitely want to see more impressive results from something like that. And I mean, yeah, on paper, still got the job done, but definitely a little bit concerning there.
Yeah, I mean, solid week 3-1, but like you said, it was a close weekend, and I feel like that's kind of been the theme for UC Irvine the last couple of weeks. Just not looking quite as convincing as they were early in the year. Still a good team, but to want to host as a team in the Big West, I think they have to be a little more convincing from here on out, especially when the RPI is going to be lacking a little bit with how down the West is.
Yeah. And now at 14, we have Coastal Carolina after a 3-1 week going to what was number 11 North Carolina midweek getting that win, and then number 19 Louisiana on the weekend winning that series. So playing ranked teams the entire week and going 3-1 is very impressive overall. Coastal Carolina was struggling a little bit coming into this week. They were winning their weekend series, but continuously going 2-2 it seemed like for the past few weeks. So getting a 3-1 week against top competition is what you want to see from a team like Coastal Carolina, and this may be their toughest week of the year. So going 3-1 is very impressive.
Yeah, this was a team that seemed like they had just kind of been treading water the last couple weeks. Just staying afloat, 2-2, not doing anything terrible, but not doing anything great. But I predicted that this could be the week that they get things back on the right track, and they certainly did. 3-1 against really good competition the whole week, and they looked more like the team that we thought they were coming into the preseason. And that offense continues to put up numbers, and we'll see if they can keep this going consistently to the end of the year.
Yep, for sure. And at 15, we have NC State going up, what, 5 spots from last week after a 2-2 week. So not the best record, but yeah, they lost their midweek. That's why it happened to be 2-2, and then beat what was number 11 North Carolina on the weekend. So good week in conference, back-to-back weeks against some of the best teams in that conference. So seems like North NC State is hot right now, but we'll see what happens. They're the streakiest team it seems like out there. So one week they'll be playing super well. These past 2 weeks have been those weeks. But next week could be a completely different team. It seems like they play up to their competition, but also down to others. So it's really hard to get a gauge of how this NC State team plays consistently.
Yeah, very inconsistent team, and a lot of their really good weeks are 2-2, just like this. But at this point, they do have three very impressive series wins over North Carolina, Clemson, and Duke. You certainly have to take that into account. Uh, it feels a little bit like Florida early in the year, where the record's just not really there, but they have won some massive weekends, and so hard to really deny their ability to hang with top competition.
Yeah, and now at 16 we have North Carolina after a 1-3 week, losing against the teams we just talked about. We got them losing the midweek versus Coastal Carolina, and then losing the weekend series at NC State. So bad week against ranked competition. If they went 2-2, would have been all right. A lot of the games were close games, but they lost all those close ones. So unfortunate way to go out. Definitely could have turned things around and gone 3-1 probably, but just on the other side of things, this North Carolina team pretty good overall, but a down week here against some of the better competition.
Yeah, really good competition, but tough to go 1-3. Like you said, close games. All three of their losses were one-run games. The midweek to Coastal, they lost in extras. So really would have liked to see them pull out one or two of those, flip it to a 2-2 week, maybe a 3-1 week. It looks a lot better. But you know what? 1-3 week against some top 15 teams in the country. It's not the end of the world, and still pretty confident in North Carolina.
Yep. And now at 17, we have Mississippi State after a 4-0 week, winning the midweek and then sweeping Auburn at home on the weekend. Good week overall. Took care of business against the Auburn team that is really struggling. At the beginning of the year, they looked like they were unlucky. Now it just seems like they're a bottom dweller of the SEC. It seems like they've accepted their fate at this point, which is unfortunate for them. But yeah, I mean, there's really no coming back for this Auburn team at this point, and Mississippi State got the job done. They played some close games, but came out with the sweep, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah, tough for Auburn, who just continues to get swept on the weekend. They have their close games here and there where they look decent and look competitive, but haven't been able to put it together. And Mississippi State has started to go on a run here, started to get consistent, and they're winning weekends in SEC play. I think they're second in their half of the SEC, so looking pretty solid there. And yeah, it'll be curious to see how they shape up against the top competition in that conference from here on out.
Yep, and now at 18, we have Louisiana going up one spot, even though they lost their weekend series. There just were a lot of teams around here that didn't have great weeks. So with Louisiana playing 5 games and going 3-2, still have a positive record to jump up the rankings just a little bit here. Overall, yeah, not a terrible week. Their weekend series was at Coastal Carolina, so it was maybe their hardest weekend of the week or of the year, and got one win out of it. So not terrible. On the road, kind of expect that result from a ranked versus ranked matchup there. But yeah, definitely the midweek games help that just overall aesthetically.
Yeah, I think this is one of those cases where series loss on the weekend, but I did come out of it feeling good about Louisiana. They were a team that had a good record, but hadn't necessarily fared well against the top competition they had played up to this point. And you may say, once again a series loss, but they looked competitive against Coastal, and once again close games. So they've shown that they can hang with those top teams. They haven't exactly figured out how to consistently win against them, but we'll see if they can figure that out once it comes postseason time.
Yep. And now at 19, we have Dallas Baptist after a 2-2 week, winning a midweek game versus what was number 18 Oklahoma State. So great midweek win. That's what you want to see out of a mid-major school like that. But then losing the weekend series versus Louisiana Tech, and I think that's what their third straight weekend series loss. So not great right now. They're definitely trending in the wrong direction, but picking up that midweek win is kind of negates this week at least from my perspective. But yeah, had the opportunity to have a really good week and just missed out there.
Yeah, it's tough. I feel like that midweek win may have potentially saved them from dropping out of the rankings. It's really tough to stay in when you drop 3 weekends a row. Unless you're in the SEC, that's the one way you can kind of get saved there. But Dallas Baptist has been hanging in since some of those were 2-2 weeks. So not terrible on the overall record, but they certainly need to flip things around and start winning games on the weekend because they're in a decent conference, but not one of the best, and they need to be able to win weekends consistently.
Yep, for sure. And now at 20, we have Alabama dropping back 3 spots from last week after a 1-3 week, losing the midweek, and then going against what is and what was number one Texas A&M and losing that weekend series. So tough week overall. If they win that midweek, going 2-2 is what you'd expect. But yeah, I mean, losing that midweek really just puts a damper on things. And for the most part, they were outclassed by A&M. Good to see them pick up that final game win. but the first two games were pretty brutal to watch from an Alabama perspective, and Texas A&M just really showed up and yeah, kind of showed their prowess to be the number one team in the nation.
Yeah, it's a tough week for Alabama. I think they really want that first game back against A&M. You're up 5-0 going into the fifth inning, and you give up 10 straight to lose 10-5. It's just tough look there. I mean, you don't think that you necessarily have it wrapped up in the fifth inning there, but you're feeling confident, and you would think that your offense is going to put up a couple more runs, or that you're not going to give up 10 straight. So tough loss there, and yeah, just tough week overall. They've had some good weekends, but another team that's just kind of been inconsistent.
Yep, for sure. And now at 21, we have Arizona, what may be one of the hottest teams in the nation right now. They went 3-1 this past week, lost their midweek, but then swept Washington State on the weekend. Just keep sweeping teams on the weekend. Now that's 13 straight wins over the weekend. So they just continue to get the job done. That means it's four straight series where they've gotten a sweep, which is super impressive. So they definitely have kind of solidified themselves as a top contender in the Pac-12 after this crazy run, and now they're leading the conference at this point after a few of the other top teams struggled this past week. Yeah, and Arizona looks like they could potentially be that team to beat at this point in the conference.
Yeah, I think this team was sitting at 10-12 or 10-13 overall. At that point, no one would think they'd have a chance at sniffing a conference title, but here they are, the front runners in the conference at this point. It's in their hands to win from here on out and take home that championship. So we'll see if they're able to do that, and they certainly will if they keep playing the way they are. It's super impressive to sweep 4 weekends in a row.
Yep. And now at 22, we have Oregon, a team that beat Arizona on the weekend, but recently has hit a little bit of a struggle, going 2-2 the past week, winning the midweek game, but then going to Stanford and losing on a normal year. That maybe is a pretty decent week, but Stanford is very down this year, not even close to what they have been the past few years. So Oregon really kind of needed this week to help out the RPI on the road, but couldn't get it done and just sitting at a pretty precarious spot right now in the RPI.
Yeah, it's a tough one because Oregon was just consistently going 2-1 on the weekend. They weren't getting the sweeps or anything, so nothing was super impressive. And so, kind of tough when you have the series loss. Finally, it kind of negates some of those series wins almost, since they weren't super impressive. But they've been pretty consistent for the most part, and we'll see if they're able to get things back on track. They have a tough weekend ahead at Oregon State, so a lot to prove there.
Yep, and next up at 23, we have Oklahoma State going back 5 spots from last week after a 1-3 week, losing the midweek versus Dallas Baptist, and then going to Kansas State and losing that series. Uh, so bad week overall. It's just impossible right now to predict what's going to happen in the Big 12. It seems like every team that gets into the rankings has a terrible week, and it seems like they drop straight back out. So it's really, really hard to figure out which team is maybe in contention and just the best team in that conference right now. Oklahoma's leading it by far, it seems like, but they have had their struggles outside of conference. But yeah, it's just a crazy time in the Big 12 and super hard to figure out what's going on there.
Yeah, the Big 12 is just an absolute mess. It looked like OK State was the hottest team in the conference. Looked like they were putting things together, maybe getting back on track to being a type of team we thought they could be preseason. A top 25 team consistently, but they're just not quite there right now. Need to see them turn it around this upcoming week, or you'll see them dropping out.
Yep, and at 24, we have South Carolina staying in that spot after a 2-2 week, winning the midweek game, and then against number two Arkansas, losing that series. So kind of expected results, what we'd expect out of this going 2-2. So that's why they're staying in that same spot. Definitely could have been a lot worse. Getting a win versus Arkansas is still an accomplishment, even though they lost the series there. But yeah, I mean, could have definitely been worse, but it was at home, so maybe want to win that series, even though it definitely is a tough one to do.
Yeah, I think this is the week you expect from South Carolina. Like you said, would have been nice to win the series, but really hard to expect when you're going up against Arkansas. So not a bad week, and there wasn't a lot of teams on the outside looking in that had great weeks, or there was a little bit of a gap more so than other weeks. So they had some room to mess with there and able to hang on in the rankings for the time being.
Yep, for sure. And then rounding out our top 25 this week is Indiana State coming into the rankings after a 2-1 week at Illinois State. Good series win on the road overall. They just continue to get the job done. They've been hanging on to the outside of the top 25 for a while now. Just haven't had an amazing series to make that jump in. And this is a week where there weren't many like major teams making big waves out there. So, good opportunity for Indiana State to come into the rankings here after a very good season overall, and yeah, just continuing to put together consistent results.
Yeah, this is another one of those teams that just really has the overall record at this point. Wasn't really too much about their weekend overall. More so just the overall resume that they have. Somehow have a top 10 RPI. Not too sure how that happened, but they're consistently winning games, and they have a great overall record. So good on them for winning that, and we'll see if they're able to continue that consistency and potentially end up hosting again.
Yep, and the team that dropped out of our top 25 this week was West Virginia after going 1-3, winning the midweek versus Pitt, and then yeah, going to Texas Tech and getting swept. So really bad week after it seemed like they just turned things around once JJ Weatherholt came back, and yeah, going completely in the opposite direction now, and yeah, continuing to prove it's impossible to predict what's going to happen in the Big 12.
Yeah, it's brutal weekend for them. We really did think they were clicking with Weatherholt back, but yeah, the Big 12 is a mess and nobody knows what's going on. Not even us, not even any of the experts. So who knows? We'll see if they're able to turn it around, but I have no idea.
Well, we're the experts, so whatever we say goes. But yeah, a few other teams right outside the top 25. For me, we have Oklahoma, another one of those Big 12 teams, as well as Texas Tech. Just seems like they need to put together a few solid weeks together in order to jump back in. Oklahoma has done that recently, but they did have a pretty bad stretch prior to that. So wanted them to put together a little bit of a run, but they're right on the fringe now, as well as Creighton and Lamar, teams that have been in consideration for a while, but just haven't had the opportunity to jump in yet and have been a little bit less consistent than they should be to be able to jump in.
Yeah, I think one other team I would highlight is Georgia Tech. Not the greatest overall record, but now sitting at 9-9 in ACC play. Just did pick up a big series win at Virginia, so decent resume overall at this point. We'll see how they continue to fare through ACC play. Another team potentially is Louisiana Tech, just picking up a big series win, and a team that's been in and out of the backside of our rankings there, and has been hanging around in that 25 to 35 range. So another team to continue to keep an eye on.
Yep, for sure. And that, I guess, is that for this week's edition of our college baseball podcast. Week 10 is now done and dusted. Be sure to keep an eye out later in the week for our next weekend series predictions. We'll have 5 amazing series to predict. Yeah, and also we'll be having our best bets over the weekend on Twitter, so you can keep an eye out for that as well. But until next time, see ya.